Welcome in the Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas, former collegiate and semi-pro pitcher, talking Phillies baseball for years over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio, and now happy to be with you here on Locked On Phillies. And thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. This Monday's episode, we've got a ranking that might hurt your feelings a little bit as Phillies fans. We're ranking the defensive, the fielding teams in the NL East and seeing where the Phillies stack up against their in-division competition. We're also going to go with a free agent spotlight. This may be the highest profile name of any of the guys that we've covered so far that we're going to get into today. And we have our first ever response to the Off the Poll segment, where we had our poll this past weekend about the Phillies' designated hitter position and who of a couple options should spend the most time in that role. We'll get into all of that, so plenty to get into. Let's get going.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I know what you're already thinking after that intro. The fielding and the defensive rankings, this is going to be a painful episode for Phillies fans. And yeah, you're right. We'll get into it, and I'll explain my reasoning. There's some other interesting stuff around the division because it is the NL East is an interesting division defensively, especially this year with some of the shifts that have already happened in free agency and some signings prior to the lockout occurring. So let's jump right into it today, actually. We're going to do something a little bit different. Normally I go bottom to top. Well, today, and I think you can guess the reason for this, we're going to be going top to bottom in our rankings, starting with the best team in the NL East defensively, in my opinion. That honor goes to the Miami Marlins. They're not going to lead the division in many of these categories. This may be the only one. We'll see what happens the rest of this week and the next couple episodes as we finish out our rankings before we jump into an NL East roundtable and debate this with the hosts of Locked On Marlins, Locked On Mets, Locked On Braves, Locked On Nationals. We'll talk through all of that in the coming days. But yes, the Marlins are the number one defensive team in the East to me this year, and that's going to bother a lot of people who are Braves fans. The Braves were the best team defensively in the division last year, but here's why I think Miami is going to overtake them this year. Miami had the seventh most defensive runs saved in baseball last year. That's the most of any team in the NL East. Now, the Braves are far behind. We'll talk about that in a second. But part of the reason I think that Miami's starting rotation and bullpen, their ERAs were so low last year. They were minuscule. And you talk about some of the talent. There's some young guys arms-wise for Miami that maybe don't look like they should be at that level yet talent-wise. Well, I think the defense is a huge part of the reason why they were there. Jazz Chisholm up the middle, becoming a great middle infielder, a solid defender. We know what he has speed and athleticism-wise. He's the anchor of that infield. And now the outfield, they signed another important piece. So Adam Duvall won the Gold Glove in right field for the National League last year when he was a member of the Atlanta Braves as part of that World Series winning team. Well, the Marlins went ahead and poached them from the other team in the division. So he goes from Atlanta a little bit further down south to Miami. He'll be playing right field for the Marlins this year and adding a Gold Glove caliber player in right field and taking it away from the Braves is a huge part of the reason why I think that Miami is the best defensive team in the NL East this year. There's also a key subtraction that could be coming for Atlanta. A lot of question marks with Atlanta defensively and throughout their roster in total that they still have to get worked out. They may not be question marks on opening day, but right now, I'm sure Miami is going to take a step forward defensively because they have young players getting even more comfortable at the major league level, and they were already solid defensively last year. They're number one. Number two, you can already tell by the way I'm talking, it's the Atlanta Braves. They were the best last year. They could, of course, be the best again this year defensively, but I'm putting that at number two because of a couple of question marks. First of all, you lose a Gold Glove player in Adam Duvall. That changes your defense a little bit. Now, it's not like basketball or football where these guys like really have to fit together and gel as a unit. Defenses significantly more individually played, especially when it comes to outfielders in baseball. So it's not like they can't put someone else out there in right field and do all right, but losing a Gold Glove caliber defender, it makes you a worse defensive team. It's only natural. There's a couple other question marks, though. So Max Fried was the Gold Glove winner at starting pitcher for the National League. Now, the pitcher Gold Glove I've always thought is a little fugazi, but because you only get so many opportunities, it goes to a starter who only pitches every 5 days. That's a whole other argument for another time. But they do have a Gold Glove winner on the team still from 2021. They still have some solid defensive players. Ozzie Alvis is a good one. But like you look at it, you could pencil in Freddie Freeman at first base every single day normally, but he's a free agent. He has not been signed yet by the Braves to return. If he leaves, that's a significant defensive downgrade. And Ronald Acuna is coming off of a significant lower body injury. We don't know what he's going to be when he returns to the Braves this season. He could not be as good of a defender as what we were used to for a little bit. I think he'll rebound fine. He's still very, very young. And he'll rebound fast, he'll rehab well, but it may take time. He may be rusty. He may have lost a step as he recovers from the injury that ended his season last year. That's why I've got the Braves at number 2. Number 3, I've got the New York Mets, 3rd place in the division. They're going to be a solid defensive team. They don't have any like really, really flashy gloves outside of Francisco Lindor. They're going to have a little bit of trouble replacing Javier Baez, who Baez wasn't there for the full season last year, but we know what he is defensively. You see the highlights posted across social medias all the time when Javier Baez plays middle infield. That's going to be a downgrade, whoever ends up replacing him there and spending most of the time in the middle of the infield alongside Lindor for the Mets, so they'll have to figure out how that all fits. But the Mets are going to be a solid team. They don't have really any holes. You've got guys like Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, who can give you better than average upside at their positions, respectively fielding. The Mets are going to make the plays they're supposed to make. They're going to make a couple flashing ones thanks to Lindor and maybe rarely some other guys, but they're just going to do the little things well. That's why I've got them right in the middle of the pack at number 3. Number 4, and this may be a little bit unfair, but it's how I feel. It's my rankings, so deal with it. No, I'm kidding. But I have the Washington Nationals as the 4th best defensive team in the division. Now, I should put the Nationals last because they basically traded everyone that was worth anything outside of Juan Soto at the trade deadline last year, moving on from guys like Trey Turner, who is a great athlete, solid defensive player, moving on from other players that just left them with guys that should not be playing at the major league level, frankly, at some positions. There's still free agency. They could still add to it, but really, I don't know where the defense really comes from on this team. They make it an upgrade because Josh Bell can now switch to the designated hitter role, and you could put a more defensively inclined first baseman out there. Juan Soto's solid defensively. He's solid in basically every aspect. That's why he's always in MVP conversations. They're not a good defense, but they're not straight up awful. And that's why I have them at number 4. Some people would have them at number 5, but for me, the worst defensive fielding team in the division in the NL East is the Philadelphia Phillies. We saw it last year. Defense ate this team alive. You had 2 of probably the worst 10 defenders in baseball on this team in Alec Bohm and Rhys Hoskins. There were points last year where those 2 had no idea how to field a baseball. It was like the Moneyball scene where they asked Scott Hatterberg what's his biggest fear, and he says a baseball being hit in my general direction. Well, that was both Rhys Hoskins and Alec Bohm last year. They looked just unable to field at a major league level. That's because they weren't. Not only that, but Didi Gregorius had a significant regression. Now the Phillies have to figure out how to fill a giant hole at shortstop. Is it going to be Freddie Galvis for a lot of time? I don't know what you get offensively from him, so I'd be surprised. Could it be Bryson Stott once he gets called up? If he gets called up, yes. But with those 2 liabilities in Hoskins and Bohm, it's too much to overcome to put them anywhere higher than the worst defensive team in the division. I mean, if you followed the Phillies last year, this is no surprise to you. This team's Achilles heel was defense. It was the inability to field the baseball. I think it was part of Aaron Nola's regression. I think it was more impressive that Zach Wheeler overcame all of that to have the year that he had, and that's why part of the reason why I think he was deserving to actually take home the NL Cy Young award rather than being runner-up. But all that being said, Philadelphia, 5th in the division, the worst fielding team. And our only hopes are, hey, maybe they go out and get somebody in free agency or a couple guys in free agency that can improve that. Right now, you're missing 2 starting outfield spots that are currently vacant, a shortstop spot you don't feel very comfortable with. There's too many question marks to put them anywhere higher than 5th. But coming up, I'm going to talk to you about the highest profile free agent in our free agent spotlight. He can certainly help the Phillies with defense. He can help them with a lot of stuff. Top to bottom, anything you want. This is a guy that could give it to the Phillies if they want to go out. And every day that passes, it seems more and more likely that he may be wearing a new uniform for the first time in his career. We'll talk about that in just a second. First, though, I want to tell you all about our friends over at BetOnline. So, football's over. Basketball, though, is heating up. It doesn't matter that baseball's going to take a little bit to get going. There's so much good hoops action. The college tournament, March Madness, right around the corner. You got to get all the information so that you're ready to place your bets and win some good money when all of the high-profile college teams tip off in the field of 64. So, from all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, you got that all if you go to betonline.net because they're the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. They remain the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline has the other niche sports, the boxing, the UFC, of course, the NHL still in full swing. You've got all of that right there and all the information you need to make great bets. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so I teased it on the other side. We've actually mentioned this guy already in this episode. And if you think about the highest profile free agents and you kind of read the tea leaves, you listen a little bit to what I'm saying, you may have already guessed. But today's free agent spotlight is none other than Freddie Freeman. Of course, longtime first baseman, a former MVP, and the face of the franchise for the Atlanta Braves. He just won the World Series down there in Atlanta. Why would he go somewhere else? Well, maybe time for a change of scenery. He may not be getting the money that he wants, but reports out of Atlanta sound like it's getting a little more dicey as to whether or not he'd be back. He is technically a free agent, so even though I still feel it's higher than a 50% chance he's in a Braves uniform next year, it's getting close enough to that I feel comfortable putting him in this free agent spotlight. And he's technically a free agent, so hey, fair game. The Phillies have a new opening at first base now that the DH position is available in the National League. We'll talk about that in a second in our Off the Pole segment where we debate who takes over that role, but one of the options is Rhys Hoskins. If you bring in Freddie Freeman and you throw the bag at him, you give him whatever money he wants to steal away the leader in the clubhouse of what's probably been your biggest division rival over the past couple of years, that's just an amazing move if the Phillies can pull it off. Why would they not be interested in Freddie Freeman? The 2020 NL MVP, he had one of the coldest streaks of his career, probably the coldest streak of his career to start off last season. He still finished with great numbers. The dude cannot be kept down. He's a consummate professional. He's a great clubhouse guy. He's a vocal leader. He is a franchise-altering player, and the Phillies already have one of those guys in Bryce Harper. You couple in Freddie Freeman, the Phillies are the favorite in the division. They are a top 3 team in the NL. I mean, this team is amazing if you bring in a Freddie Freeman to couple with a Bryce Harper, a JT Realmuto, a Rhys Hoskins, this pitching staff, a young bullpen that may be better this year with a little bit more experience. All of that, they're ancillary pieces that if you bring in a guy as talented as Freddie Freeman that gives you what he gives you both at the dish and in the field, he can put you over the top. He's going to be costly. It's probably the biggest reason why he doesn't want to be back with Atlanta. If he does leave, is the money situation. He deserves to get paid. And with a World Series winning roster, there are a lot of guys coming up that Atlanta's going to have to pay. They're going to have to pay Ozzie Albies. They're going to have to pay Ronald Acuna. They're going to have to get these guys contracts and get these guys extensions, whatever the case may be. A lot of money to be thrown around when you win a World Series. And casualties of that are the older players, regardless of how talented. I think it's dumb that Freddie Freeman is not already re-signed by the Braves. But hey, he's dangling out there, and the Phillies are just a little fish swimming along that might be ready to bite. I would love it if they did, because I think that is a great way to put them as the favorite to win the NL East. And of all the free agent spotlights we've gone through, the Carlos Correas, Trevor Story, Michael Conforto, these are some good names. They're not Freddie Freeman. They're just not. Even Carlos Correa, a World Series winner, a guy that has potential to be the best at his position. Yeah, it's not the same as a guy who has won an MVP, who still has many good years of baseball left and brings what he brings to a clubhouse. So it's a dream scenario. And tomorrow, when we do free agent spotlight, we're going to talk about another dream scenario. And he's a guy that's been tied to the Phillies for a couple years now. But Freddie Freeman, wouldn't that be amazing if he was wearing red pinstripes? That first series against Atlanta would be awesome. Awesome. It's a dream, and it may not come true. But that's why we spotlight these guys, to give you an idea of what is possible out there. Now, you can get really good free agent information from me, but you got to go somewhere else to find the absolute best on MLB prospects. So I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. But I also want you to check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Lindsey Crosby, who's the host over there, he's a prospect encyclopedia. You can catch our crossover on the YouTube channel, on our podcast feed. We did a great crossover on some Phillies minor leaguers, and he's going deep on the MLB stars tomorrow across the entire major league and minor league systems. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. Now, we're going to wrap up today's episode with our first ever edition of Off the Poll. Off the Poll, again, is our segment where we take a poll that we went through this weekend. I'll explain more on the other side, and we'll talk through what the poll was, what your responses were on Twitter, and what I think about that question. I'll give you my thoughts. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. Before we get into our Off the Poll segment, though, I want to talk to you about Built Bar. So we're into March. Today, as I'm recording this Sunday night, and it is like 70 degrees here in Philly. You know what that means? Weather is warming up. You got to get beach ready, summer ready. And that's why you need Built Bar. They're awesome protein bars. If you need the better flavor, they've got it. They have puffs. They're protein-infused marshmallows. Have you ever heard of them before? No, you haven't, because no one else is doing it. It's awesome, and they've got great flavors. Listen, a cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They also have regular protein bars, and listen to the numbers on these. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Also, some additional great flavors with the regular bars, mint brownie, coconut almond, and they come out with new flavors all the time. Built Bar is the best tasting way to get into shape for summer. And at Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy, and I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. So I want you to go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 and you can get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. This episode's also brought to you by Rock Auto. You got to find a way to get to the beach this summer, and the best way to do that, you got to drive. You got to make sure your car, your truck, whatever it is in tip-top shape, and there's no better place to get the parts you need than at Rock Auto. You don't want to deal with the local chains and the auto parts stores that don't have everything in stock and are just tapping away on their computer, when you can go on your computer and handle everything yourself without all the fuss. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Why not use them? You save time, you save money. You can save up to 30%, 50%, some cases even 100% less than what you would spend at your local stores and things like that. It's such a better option. Part of it's because they're a family business and they've been serving do-it-yourselfers like you for over 20 years. Their prices have been reliably low the whole time they've been doing it too. They're an awesome place, so go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to all of your auto part needs. I want you to go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure you write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that I sent you in. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, so it's time for our very first edition of Off the Poll. I know I've explained it to you and exactly what this segment is. We're responding to the Twitter poll that I had up on our Locked On Phillies account. You can follow that on Twitter at LO_Phillies. That's LO, like locked on, underscore Phillies. And you can go ahead, and if you didn't participate in this poll, you can jump in on next weekend's poll, and we'll go through all that. We'll have another great one for you. But this week, for our first one, here's the question I asked. Who do you want to see spend more time in the DH role for the Phillies in 2022? Now, the way we do this, because polls are limited and I want to keep the discussion more concise, I gave you two options. Most of these, the large majority, are going to be one or the other type of questions. So the two options were Rhys Hoskins and Alec Bohm. We talked about them when we ranked the defensive teams in the NL East, and they were a big reason why the Phillies were the worst defensive team in the NL East last year, and why I had them as the worst defensive team again this year. Now, part of that can be mitigated by moving one of these guys to the designated hitter role. And here's what you guys said for who you think. 72% of the responders had Rhys Hoskins as their preferred option at designated hitter. I'm going to honestly disagree with you guys. I'm going to try and make a little bit of your argument for you because, of course, it's a poll. We just have that response, I have the chance to argue the other side. So I like to try and hash out why I feel that vote went that way. Rhys was significantly the better offensive player last year. Prior to his season-ending injury with about a month left in the year, he was heating up again. He was one of the hottest hitters in baseball. We saw when he first got called up to the major leagues, he had one of the hottest entrances to the league ever. He was amazing to start. Then he had some issues with his swing, and it seemed like he was figuring it out near the end of last year. He's the better offensive option. So it seems natural that you want the better offensive option to be the designated hitter, right? Well, for me, and I've talked about it in previous episodes, I think a big part of Alec Bohm's issues at the dish last year stemmed from his trouble in the field. I think mentally he got into a bad place because of his defensive lack of ability, and it bled into his time at the plate. If you take that away from him, the necessity to think about defending and playing third base and playing a tough position over there, and just have him focus on hitting, I think you can turn him into the rookie of the year candidate that he was back in 2020. I think he becomes more of that player again than what we saw from him this past season, where he was lost in the field and eventually at the plate and ended up being sent down. That's why I think Alec Bohm is the better option. You don't get as much as what you get with Rhys Hoskins, but I think Rhys will end up being the first baseman again. I think it'll be easier to find someone to replace Alec Bohm at third base if you bring in a high-profile guy like a Trevor Story or a Carlos Correa. Maybe Freddie Galvis becomes that guy that plays third base for the Phillies. Maybe Gene Segura shifts over there. I know he's really good at second, really good at short, but you prefer to keep him at one of those two positions. But if necessary, you have other guys that can fill that role. Who plays first without a free agent addition if Rhys Hoskins isn't over there? JT Realmuto? Matt Vierling? I mean, we talked about Freddie Freeman. If he comes in, it makes it significantly easier. Then sure, Rhys Hoskins should be the DH day in and day out. But with the team as it currently stands, I think Alec Bohm is easier to replace defensively. And I think taking that off of his plate and just allowing him to go up there and swing the bat, I think it's going to significantly help his production at the plate in 2022. That's why I think I see him as the majority defensive designated hitter this season. But of course, it looks like we had a large majority of you. Only 28% of responders agree with me that Bohm is the guy. A lot of you think it should be Hoskins. I think I'm attributing that to Hoskins is just a better offensive player, which is fair. We'll see how it plays out. The cool thing is they're probably going to alternate. We're going to get to see this play out live. It's a nice new wrinkle to something that we haven't seen as Phillies fans. We haven't had the opportunity to watch guys play in the designated hitter role here in Philadelphia ever. It's the first time. So it'll be a very unique new wrinkle to the 2022 season. I'm very excited to see how it played out. And I was excited to see how our first off the poll segment played out. I thought that was a very fun poll. I thought that was a very interesting discussion. Hopefully you did too. And I want to thank you for taking the time to respond to that. It's your interaction that allows us to do that segment together. So thank you for everyone who responded to that tweet and went ahead and put their votes in. Hopefully we get even more responses next time. But that's the very first off the poll. That'll be every weekend. So we'll have the poll up from about Friday to sometimes Sunday morning. And then I'll go ahead and record this episode for you guys, on Monday, where I go through and debate, basically, it'll seem like against myself, but against whatever point of view, or maybe I'll agree with whatever point of view the fan base, you, took on that poll this weekend. That'll do it for today's episode. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now, Wednesday, got another great episode for you. We have Stepping Off, as always, a fun little side topic where we step outside of the lines. Something really good for you on that. Last week, we did walkout songs. The week before that, we did places to grab beers around Citizens Bank Park. It lightens up the middle of the week. I always love that. We've got another high-profile free agent spotlight for you. And Wednesday, another ranking. I guarantee you, I pinky promise you, the Phillies will not be in last in this one. So it'll be a little bit more joyous debate about another facet of the NL East and where the Philadelphia Phillies rank. All of that coming up in Wednesday's episode. Now, I want you to make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please make sure you call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues, past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. These videos come out all the time during the week. We're going to have some additional clips for you. Make sure you rate us, review us, everything you need to do to get the word out there that Locked On Phillies is your best place for Philadelphia Phillies daily content. That's all we've got for you today. I will speak to you again on Wednesday.